Imagine a quiet piece of farmland, a simple field of corn, owned by a farmer named David Miller. But on September 17, 1862, this ordinary field near Sharpsburg, Maryland, became the setting for the single deadliest day in American military history. Before the sun even rose, the air was thick with a heavy, nervous tension. Soon, this peaceful landscape would be torn apart by the Battle of Antietam, and at its very heart lay this cornfield, a place that would earn a chilling new name: the Cornfield Massacre. This battle was a massive turning point. It was Confederate General Robert E. Lee's first major invasion of the North, a bold gamble to shift the war's momentum and maybe even win support from foreign nations. The stakes couldn't have been higher, but of all the ground where the Union and Confederate armies clashed that day, this 24-acre cornfield would become the focus of almost unimaginable violence. As the first faint light of dawn painted the sky, the Union commander, General Joseph Hooker, ordered his First Corps forward. The soldiers faced a strange and imposing obstacle: the cornfield itself. The stalks were so tall and dense they formed a massive green wall, a disorienting maze that swallowed light and sound. Marching into it felt like stepping into another world. You couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. You couldn't hear commands clearly, and you had absolutely no idea what was waiting for you on the other side. And then it began. The moment the first Union soldiers stepped out from the cover of the woods, the morning stillness shattered. Confederate cannons, hidden on a nearby rise, roared to life. The ground shook as artillery shells ripped through the Union lines, tearing gaps in their ranks. It was a shocking and brutal welcome. But despite the chaos, the Union men pressed on, their orders clear: break Lee's northern flank, no matter the cost. The true horror, however, started the second they stepped into the corn. Inside, visibility dropped to almost zero. The tall stalks muffled sounds, creating a confusing, surreal environment. Officers screamed orders that were lost in the rustling leaves and the din of battle. Formations disintegrated as soldiers stumbled into each other in the green haze, often unable to tell friend from foe until they were faced. It wasn't a battle line. It was a series of frantic, brutal, close-range collisions. Men were firing at shadows, reacting to flashes of movement, fighting for their lives in a green labyrinth. Leading this initial push was the legendary Iron Brigade, known as one of the toughest and most disciplined units in the entire Union Army. Their disciplined advance slammed into the Confederate line like a thunderbolt, slowly but surely forcing the Southern troops back through the corn. It looked like the Union might be on the verge of a breakthrough, but Confederate General Stonewall Jackson, a master of rapid counterattacks, was not about to let his line collapse. He called in his reserves, unleashing the ferocious Texas Brigade led by John Bell Hood. These were some of the most relentless fighters in the Confederacy, and they surged forward with a raw, furious energy. The moment they hit the Union line, the momentum of the battle shifted violently. The cornfield, which had just been won by the Union, was now being ripped back from their grasp. It became a vortex of combat, a whirlwind where the fields changed hands again and again, sometimes in the span of just a few minutes. A soldier later described it as a place where victory and defeat seemed to swap places with every volley. And then came the deadliest 10 minutes of the entire battle. Historians estimate that in one short, incredibly intense period, over 2,000 men were killed or wounded in this small patch of land. Let that sink in. That's more than 200 casualties every single minute. To give you some perspective, that rate of loss is comparable to the first wave of soldiers hitting Omaha Beach on D-Day. But here it was compressed into a tiny fraction of the time and space. So why was this one small field so unbelievably deadly? First, it was the terrain. The corn offered perfect concealment, but absolutely no protection from bullets or shells. This meant every encounter was sudden, shocking, and at point-blank range. There was no seeing the enemy from a distance. They just appeared right in front of you. Second, it was the sheer concentration of men. Both sides funneled thousands of soldiers into this narrow 24-acre space, creating a dense and incredibly volatile front line. And third, it was the relentless, unbroken pace of the fighting. There were no pauses, no moments to catch your breath or regroup. As soon as one brigade was shattered and pulled back, another was thrown right into the meat grinder. Men were fed into the fight continuously, one wave after another, with new relief. By about 9 in the morning, the fighting in the cornfield finally started to die down, as the focus of the battle shifted south to another infamous landmark that would be called Bloody Lane. But the damage was already done. What started as a farmer's peaceful crop had become one of the most fiercely contested and blood-soaked pieces of ground in the entire Civil War. When the sun finally set on September 17th, the Battle of Antietam was over. Lee's battered army began its retreat back into Virginia. And with that strategic victory, however costly, came one of the most important moments in American history. President Abraham Lincoln seized the opportunity to issue the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. This monumental act transformed the war. It was no longer just a fight to preserve the Union. It was now a moral crusade for freedom, but the cost was staggering. Nearly 23,000 casualties in a single 12-hour period. And nowhere was that terrible price more visible than in David Miller's cornfield. Burial teams who arrived the next day found a landscape that was completely unrecognizable. The corn stalks were shredded, the ground was littered with the fallen, and the site left a permanent, haunting scar on every survivor who witnessed it. Today, the cornfield at Antietam National Battlefield stands as a quiet, powerful monument. It is a silent reminder of the sheer intensity and the devastating human costs of the Civil War. The fighting here wasn't about grand strategies or brilliant maneuvers on a map. It was about the raw, terrifying, overwhelming reality of close-range combat. It was about the grit and determination of thousands of men who met each other in a place they never expected would become one of the deadliest patches of land in American history. More than 160 years later, we still talk about those 10 minutes in the cornfield, because in that short, brutal span of time, we see the true face of the conflict, intense, chaotic, and profoundly human. Thank you for watching. If you found this deep dive into one of America's most intense historical moments interesting, please give this video a like and subscribe for more stories from the past. And let us know in the comments which battle you'd like us to cover next. We'll see you in the next one.